Chapter 39, Imagining a Key. Imagining a Key. A figure stood atop the radio antenna of Willis Tower, once known as Sears. Head bowed, palms pressed together, one leg drawn up and the sole of her foot placed against her lower thigh. In this position she had remained 4 months. Kiss. That was her name, Kiss. Hungarian in origin, a language she never knew, so its connotations had always come from her natural tongue. If one stood perfectly still, and never spoke, and never thought, one consumed no energy. A complete obviation of selfhood. The unnatural cold long since settled into her biorhythm. She could feel her own heartbeat, and feeling it allowed her to reduce it to non-existence, until her blood did not pulse. In this way, she became not a person. Ella Kiss. Seattle. She had become the antenna on which she stood. She added about 5 more feet to this once tallest building. After 4 months, somebody had spoken to her. The action had forced her to exist again. Her total nothingness became, instead, a 0.00001. The radio antenna told the one who spoke to her that it would pray. She had attempted to resolve again to 0 afterward, but she could not. Her hibernation was ending. She soon felt twitches in the antenna, signals transmitted where before had been stillness. The building was coming alive again, and so she steadily increased, a larger and larger fraction of a percentage. Then, perhaps 2 days later, the world awoke too. The clouds broke. Rain fell upon her, warm rain, strangely warm rain, no sunshine. This was Chicago after all, but rain, hard and fast and hot. It struck her head, back, arms, every part of her body. The resonations spread throughout her skin. It had become clear. She could no longer not exist. She had to exist again. Her eyes opened. The entire city of Chicago fanned around her. The skyscrapers, the suburbs, the lake. Sounds, which had before been silent, filtered upward, car horns, a low rumble, some medley incomprehensible but undeniably human. In the narrow streets so far below, people were moving. Everyone was returning to existence. "Oh," said Ella Kiss. The world of before still existed. It would always exist. The things that had happened, the things she had done, they will have always happened, they will always be done. She killed her sister. That fact was truth. But she consumed energy again, she could no longer cease existing without death. Even in the rain, amid the bustle of humanity, she could sense a massive amount of wraiths. Yes, something had happened all right, and even if that something had ended now, what had done could not be undone. Its residuals remained. Ella Kiss tilted back her head, took in the rain on her face, and summoned her soul gem. A flash of light enveloped her, a costume of a fool or jester. A rifle manifested in one hand. Time to exist. The news helicopters had swirled around the city for some time now, and their coverage had played on a television that thankfully never ran out of power. Who knew how the Baroness' little friend would have reacted if she did not have at least this outlet for her impotent hatred? So now that everything had ended, and the men and women on all the channels were saying the same thing, "It's over, it's over," not that any of them knew exactly what it was, why it had happened, or how it ended. Now her little friend had finally fallen asleep. On her side on the couch, her chest slowly rising and falling, and no discontented dreams to trouble her. Finally, a peaceful sleep. The Baroness sat beside her and ran fingers through her hair. The smoke from her cigarette pooled the space above her as she allowed the television to play. Were its constant buzz of excitement and exclamation suddenly stoppered, and silence allowed again to reign in the household, perhaps her little friend would awaken in shock, and the whole rigmarole would repeat. She leaned back against the cushion, stretched her legs along the floor. Tears remained in her eyes, but she had stopped her silent crying. "Thank you," she whispered, so silent even she could not hear it, while a reporter hanging wildly out the side of a helicopter fanned her arm to indicate the United States Capitol and the dome that had collapsed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Isabel. Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me. You probably will never know, because whether you survived or not you probably will never return here. But thank you, if you are dead, and watching maybe, thank you, thank you, thank you. Everything you loved may have left this world, and you may not have had much reason for what you did. You may have done some ugly things to make it happen. I saw your speech on TV. But Isabel, Isabel, thank you. Because it meant something to me, because I had something to protect, thank you. Thank you. Despite your emptiness, despite the husk you had become, you did something good. In the end, you did, that was what the Baroness believed. Thank you, thank you. Maybe this note of thanks is no consolation to you, Isabel. That's okay. Just know that somebody thanks you." The Baroness smothered her cigarette. Very carefully, she shifted her little friend's body on the couch to make room, and slid under the blankets beside her. She was quite warm, quite smooth, and soft. And she was alive, and the world was alive, and together they would live. Tomorrow they would leave this wretched home. There would be much to rebuild. Already people, not hounds, howled outside, adding to the noise of the reporters. But for now they could sleep, like this, together. Thank you. In an alley, amid stacks of trash, a few corpses lingered. Not really a surprising scene, everywhere else looked much the same. In the final moments before the end, the miasma began to chew the few thousand apples it had kept stored in its cheeks. For everyone hobbling around amid ecstatic cheers, another everyone lay dead. Two figures here were alive, one an albino seated in an almost catatonic trance, the other a cat unseen to the first perched on a jutting fragment of building. The cat kicked her legs over the side and rolled her head against the stone. 15 helicopters shot overhead. She counted their cyclical whir as they neared and then departed. Dr. Cho was dead. This fact surprised Christine Luce more than the dismantling of the miasma. Dr. Cho had always seemed, to her, one of those types who stood outside the corporeality of this world, who inhabited a metaphysical plane, some dimension of thought and theory that lacked practical application. She could never bite the world, but it could never bite her in turn. Well, but the doctor had been the one to produce bodies. The thoughts had always been Christine's. The albino still alive, Lachesis, Christine never touched her. She was just an assistant, so she lacked a mind or memory. But she lingered beside the body the way a pet might, praying for the miracle of resurrection. On a personal level, Christine and Dr. Cho hadn't connected much. But there was no denying their professional connection, a connection that created life. How many of their children were still alive? She could ask Kyubei. For some reason she had never wondered about this before. She really shouldn't worry about it now. Once the hysteria subsided, everyone still alive would clamor for her head. Without the miasma, the energy that gave her such control over her powers would fade. She wouldn't be able to remain invisible to their sight forever, so she needed to act fast. The pragmatic side of her, that same useful cowardice, almost instantly concocted a plan. Reach the airport, board a plane, cash out the favors Cube owed her and carve a niche for herself in one of the smaller, isolated cities to the north. She would take this final dummy lachesis with her and fill its head with thoughts for her protection. Assuming Cube owed her favors. Nobody owed her anything now but hate, and she realized, now that the overwhelming darkness had fallen away and the remains of the world were held up to the light, that this time, finally, she deserved it. The 4 months had passed in a daze, but now she knew exactly what she had done. Anchorage would be a good city. As she boarded the plane, she would spread a rumor that she left the country. Competing rumors, competing countries. Did she defect to China? A new life in Tristan da Cunha? Or like all those Nazis who vanished into Argentina? The uncertainty would breed conspiracy and they would not look so much in their own nation. Damn it! Damn it! An entire life, on the run, running, hiding, every single human in this whole world searching for her. She dug this hole for herself, she dug it so damn deep and she dug it just for herself, the exact thing she feared most, and she leapt right inside it. Ha, khh, kahaha, kkkkccccchhhhh. She coughed on her own phlegm and choked until her eyes watered and the inside of her throat got all scraped up nice and good the way she liked it. Her best option was to disappear the way only magical girls can. Then she could be the bogeyman that haunts this world, the cat creeping somewhere. Where is she? They'll never find her. They'll always believe in her. They can chase her but she will have long ago escaped, where they can never find her. Kek. Someone pitter-pattered below. Christine's head lolled with semi-apathetic interest that immediately lurched such surprise that in her startled scraping she dropped off her perch and hit the ground hard enough to spit blood. Her magical distortion of self to prevent anyone from seeing her should not have faltered even given that graceless plunge, but the newcomer saw her anyway. She leapt back with equivalent shock and collapsed into a mound of trash that instantly sullied a somehow spotless white dress.
Hey? Hello? Are you okay?
Said Millie.
HKKKHH, KKKNNGH, HCKH, ah.
Christine stood, wiped her bloody lip.
You can see me.
Millie blinked, as though this question were obvious.
Yes.
Then her magic was fading faster than she thought. Of course, Millie might have stronger than average tolerance given she was both a magical girl and a product of Christine's own mind. But the alarms went off, time to leave and not hang around, only so much time. The airports will be crammed, assuming they're even operational. Millie's surprise dissipated. She shrugged and continued the way she was going, to Dr. Cho's body. Lachesis lifted her head but said nothing. And despite the still pulsing escape routes in her head, Christine stood aside and watched as Millie knelt near the corpse and placed her hand on its forehead.
Doctor, she said. Dr. Cho. I did it. I did something, at least, although I am afraid it is difficult for me to understand what I did. And although I know that what I did was good, and that many people were saved at least partially because of it, I still do not feel happy. Even though I met God, even though I helped God. Many people also died because of me. Val died because of me. You also died because of me. So I understand that no matter how many times I say sorry to you, it will mean nothing. You will not even hear it. But I do want to say, I am sorry.
Then she clasped her hands, bowed her head, and prayed, silently. The blood from Christine's split lip pooled upon her upturned palm and dripped to the pavement. She sucked the lip and swallowed the blood and wiped the rest on her thigh. the cut regenerated. A cough swallowed in her throat. If Christine hadn't made this Millie, her situation wouldn't be so precarious now. She had been completely ignorant to this fact in the moment, but knew enough now to understand that Dr. Cho did not want this particular creature created for no reason. She approached and hovered a hand over Millie's shoulder, ground teeth together, and touched her. Millie looked up. Her expression was more blank than perhaps it should have been.
Yes? Do you need assistance?
She blinked and stood abruptly.
I am sorry, I really should have spent more time helping everyone. There must be many wounded people in trouble. I do not know what I was thinking. There will be time for the dead later, for now I must. Hey. Yes? I am sorry.
A flurry of useless activity. After a pause, Christine swallowed.
In not long, I'm going to disappear, and you'll never see me again. You don't know who I am, but I
made you. Saying that will only be weird.
Okay, you see her.
She pointed at Lachesis.
Yes, she is unharmed, do not worry. I will help her. She's your sister, you know. I know.
She knew. She added,
were you a friend of Dr. Cho? Oh, that would explain a lot. I am so sorry for not realizing sooner. Did you come to pay your respects as well? Or did you not know until now that she... So Dr. Cho told you about where you came from?
Millie shook her head. She stared down at the doctor.
No, I only guessed. But it is hard to deny, given the evidence. Okay. So you know, that if you try to go back to the place you think is home, you won't?
A sad, simple nod.
I was created for a single purpose, I am coming to understand. A purpose I served.
This statement was punctuated by a long silence, a deep gulf that plummeted down into an endless awkward moment. Tremors ran up Christine's veins and her hands shook at her sides. A vision entered her head of throwing her arms around this girl, embracing her, an action upon which she could not act. Millie tilted her head.
Oh. Your emotions, I am sorry, I believe I have the ability to sense what other people are feeling, and if you consider it invasive, I can attempt to stop. NNH, GH. HKK. MMNKH. U.
In a sudden seizure of resolve, she threw her hands forward to at least grab Millie's shoulders but halted just before touching the plain material of her blouse.
Millie, don't ever think there's a purpose beyond what you make for yourself. You may have been made with a purpose. Even if it's not the one you think.
Christine scratched her throat. It was more like a competing triangle of purposes. Kyubei, or whoever masterminded this plot, and Dr. Cho, and Christine herself.
That girl there, is your sister. She doesn't have much in her head. So it'll probably be, really hard, but please take care of her. Teach her. She can learn. I know you have some good stuff in you. So just teach her that stuff.
She turned away, she sounded like an idiot, the other part of her head screeched to flee before she lost her window.
Are you an assistant of Dr. Cho? You seem to know so much. What is your name, if I may ask?
What's your name, "What's your name, cat, Joliet?" She suddenly laughed, although she was aware it sounded like a laugh only to herself. Another helicopter rushed overhead and spooked her. "To hell with it, to hell."
"Christine," she said as she already started running. "Christine Deepazan. Read my book. Read my book, it'll tell you everything." "Ha, huck, KKKKKKKHHHHHCCCHHH."
Between the buildings she darted. Millie called after her. Millie the fruit and Christine the rind. Down the drain she circled, around and around, and disintegrated into the realm between fact and fiction, to become the bogeyman that haunted the new world. At the capital, everyone still didn't know exactly what had happened. Many were wounded, many more dead. Some went ballistic in victory, while others rolled screaming with a leg gnashed off at the knee. The wound-up tightening of remaining human energy loosened, everyone fell apart. On the magical side, the Archon had vanished without dispersing its power, so many were more exhausted than the humans. Kenosha lazed, near Comatose, on a ravaged knoll in the mall. She might have celebrated despite her fatigue, if not for certain circumstances that turned her reflective instead. Cook's harem, like good urban professionals, congregated in geometric patterns nearby and discussed the ramifications of today's revolt in detached, technical terms. They had all been to college. Some were Marxists, others more Randian in bent. Despite differences in opinion, they remained all smiles. The discussion itself was great fun, fantastic speculation on future developments. They didn't know Cook was dead yet. Elsewhere, Berwin picked her way among the wounded and administered haphazard dosages when she could. She wiped her brow as she moved from one moaning body to the next. It had been her tactical decision to remain outside the final confrontation. She had someone to protect, after all. Nonetheless, an iota of remorse crept inside, a feeling that she had been so close to something large and instead hid. This iota she crushed with every fiber of rationality. She made objectively the correct decision. There was a reason both she and the person that mattered most to her were still around to comb through the aftermath, while several familiar faces were nowhere to be seen. Not Clown Muffle, of course. Miss Viscera, Miss Flossmoor. She sat cross-legged on the Capitol mezzanine, surrounded by the wreckage of the dome. Nobody approached her, not even the maddened flurry of revelers howling bad attempts at songs down the steps from her. Her continued existence may have prompted reason for worry, but Berwin had a suspicion that without a hand to steer her, Clown Muffle would slump like a marionette. The problem would be when the humans calmed down and remembered their hatred for her, their Schrödinger. Until then, Berwin healed as she could. Darien, who she had left under a tree to recover, eventually caught up to her. Rubbing her head and neck and blinking, she said,
"Wah, did we win?" I don't remember any of it,"
said Darien. The disappointment more than apparent.
"You did phenomenal, Pepper."
Berwin slid a syringe into someone.
"Phenomenal, absolutely phenom. I did help, of course."
The attempt, in her mind, was to sound genuinely congratulatory, but she had to focus too much on her task. Her magic had started to run low. One of those factors, or both combined, either way, her irritation equaled in obviousness Darien's disappointment. At least the understanding was mutual. Darien hung back aloof and surveyed the surroundings. Berwin, although busy with her work, made sure to gauge her expression when she noticed Clown Muffle on the mezzanine. But Darien only lingered a moment there, a slight frown, and then a loosening of all tension into a sigh.
"What happened to the witch?"
Berwin did not know. She had not seen her. Not since the guillotine, at least, so she could suspect a finale. Nor had she seen Miss Sayaka or her other angel friend, the short one with the white hair. Angels were busy folk, and those two had overstayed their welcome on this world anyway. Mission accomplished, they might proudly declare in echo of the strung banner under which they passed on their promenade back to heaven. No, the first familiar face who approached them belonged to a creature not altogether human. "Congratulations," the White Rabbit said from a lofty perch on the severed neck of an equestrian statue. "It appears this world will continue to exist after all."
"And that means you'll continue to exist too, said Berwin.
"Yes. My species still considers my behavior to be irrational, of course. A miracle's occurrence does not retroactively justify the act of hoping for one. But the terms of my execution were specifically tied to the time this world ceased operations, and it appears its operations will continue for the foreseeable future."
"Why you telling us this?"
Darien, arms folded, stared down the mall toward the ruined Washington Monument.
"What do you want us to do for you now?"
"Oh, nothing of the sort. I simply hope you both continue to be productive magical girls. To describe the current situation metaphorically, you might say that the splinter has been removed, but the wound is still infected. It will require many magical girls to eliminate the wraiths that have appeared across the world. Maintaining positive relationships with those who remain is more pertinent than ever." In classic Kyubei fashion, he managed to make even his rare gestures of kindness come across as sleazy. The frigidity between Berwin and Darien cracked for a moment and they exchanged bemused glances that led to bizarrely synchronized shrugs. Darien turned away suppressing a snort, which only made Berwin giggle in kind.
"All right, thanks Kyubei, you're a most appreciated conversation partner as always,"
Berwin said upon recovery. "Of course, the way this world operates will need to change. It takes relatively little energy to prevent a human from learning something that is foreign to them. But now that the secret of magic has been revealed, I'm afraid it would take far too much energy to cause the entire human species to forget about it. As such, I will be requesting your cooperation as I establish several new methodologies for the collection of grief cubes." The good humor faded and the glance Berwin and Darien exchanged turned suspicious.
"What is that supposed to mean?"
said Darien. "I could explain, but I must admit my powers of persuasion on certain topics can be a bit lacking. There'll be somebody coming along soon to explain in my place, in a way that will be more familiar and comforting to you. In fact, they should be arriving any moment now." As though he had timed it, he probably had. The moment he finished his sentence, the omnipresent sound of helicopters encircling the city grew into an attention-grabbing roar. Everyone craned their necks. From above, black shadows descended, twin-propelled and barely off balance, touching down first with the front landing gear and then the back in a cleared section of the mall nobody remembered having been cleared. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pentagrammic in position, sleek long sliding doors opened and figures poured out onto the grass. A ring of cameras flashed. The collective news, present at the Cat's final conference only a few hours prior, had reconvened for a moment of this exactitude. An outer disk of new copters revolved, each tilting inward to watch the disturbance. Shouted questions assaulted the figures who disembarked, a standard litany of who, what, when, where, why. The figures were not, ostensibly, military. Their outfits were bright, showy, attention-grabbing, despite the practiced lines in which they wove, despite the years they had dwelled in this world's shadows. The press people recognized none of them, but to those who had frequented Magnet in its heyday, a few faces sprung familiar. Foremost of them, with a genial smile and a camera-mugging wave that drew a few IROLLs from her followers, was a person best known by the name Calgary and jangly with gold chains, diamond rings, a glinting canine poking just below a curved upper lip. It became clear these girls weren't as practiced in whatever formation they had attempted to make. Calgary set the tone, acting and looking the part of a hip-hop star passing fan service to paparazzi, snapback, and Versace skinny jeans and a fur-trimmed jacket short enough to bare midriff. Calgary was the last remaining of Denver's inner circle, an illustrious upper echelon of Magnet that included the Seattle Sisters, Minneapolis, and the favorite of Denver's local underlings. She had always played the role of the fun one, the admin who'd wink a blind eye if your chat on the romance board got a little racier than PG-13, the strategic counterpoint to the heavy-handed moralizing of the others, the drug PSA that featured a rap rhyming crack with whack.
Io.
Hand gestures too non-denominational to be considered gang signs, a pretended jump shot basketball toss to Baltimore who she recognized among the growing crowd. Whatever seriousness this squad had attempted to muster devolved, half started to ape Calgary and the other half made a woeful attempt to keep composed.
What up, Io?
Her grandstanding weighted her into the orbit of Berwin and Darien, but she knew neither of them and instead tilted half an eye to Cube. Which way? Up those stairs, he replied, with a flick of the tail toward the mezzanine. You sure she's safe? I've been monitoring her physical and mental condition to the best of my ability. I believe her to be quite sedate.
Right.
Around her wrist she swung a glinting chain with a diamond-encrusted piece that read sway on the end. Arching her knees into a series of agile bounces just restrained enough to seem casually if athletically human, she gallivanted up the steps followed by a handful of the other magical girls who hadn't been completely ensnared in the camera flashes.
Charlie V.
Calgary shimmied a white elliptical pattern around the clown in question.
Charles V, my king. Used to be you'd send girls light 7 to strong 6s, wasn't that the shit? Not to wax overly braggadocious my babes, but she gave me a 9, Io.
A tongue wagged at both her underlings and the reporters who had tramped after her.
Now it's all business, I. Everyone's thinking you gotta answer for some stuff, no skin off my flint but what ya gonna do? Wrists out betch, you under arrest.
Good acting. Only a few realized her exact level of anxiety as the near comatose creature cradling its legs before her lifted a dull expression her way. Cameras clicked and Calgary's smile gleamed even as her eyes flitted far too fast between Clown Muffle and the lenses.
Io,
she said.
Hands out, not quite feeling the use of force right now. Come on, unless you wanna get dogpiled by all these lovely chickadees I got on squad, Io.
Clown Muffle just sat. Calgary risked a nudge with the edge of her Louboutin men's red bottoms.
Rutai, come on,
she whispered.
Everyone's waiting.
This phrase registered and Clown Muffle looked up.
Oh.
She held out her hands. In a millisecond Calgary whipped a crazy 8 with her chain and the chain wound up around Clown Muffle's wrists. Once set securely, the chains transformed into a set of jeweled fuzzy cuffs and a far more confident Calgary squatted and posed for the pictures that flared all around her. Schrödinger apprehended, the titles would say under the articles already written in the time it took you to read this sentence. Calgary had the power to nullify the supernatural with her chains. This extended to both miasmas and magical girls, as a file in a briefcase once stated. With the cuffs secured around Clown Muffle's wrists, Calgary quickly flashed a hand out, pulled the ring from Clown Muffle's finger, shined it on her jacket, and showed it to the cameras before finally pocketing it. Clown Muffle continued to sit.
"Alright, Io."
Calgary motioned to her goons.
"It's safe now, tell the big man he can come on out if he want."
The word spread electric down the line of magical girls who suddenly seemed not dispersed at random but at perfect intervals to maintain the peace and scope out any possible threats. It returned to the 5 helicopters, whose blades had finally slowed enough for the drone to subside. Everyone who turned their heads after the misdirection involving Calgary and Clown Muffle realized that somehow a small stage had been erected in the center of the helicopters, complete with a podium and a microphone. Although not many had noticed, the 5th helicopter, which was identical to the others, had never opened its doors. Only once the word reached the magical girls who formed a perimeter around the landing zone and the attention riveted to the stage did it betray any activity. Its door slid open, a single figure emerged, this one even the humans recognized. The president's daughter. Morose in expression, she considered the surroundings without much interest. She wore a kind of white robe but her bearing was blandly professional. After a few moments of inspection, she nodded back to the helicopter. A final figure emerged, and this one was a man, recognized by every single person present regardless of age, ideology, or country of origin. He wore a thick, pendulous coat that swished around his heels as he strode onto the lawn, white snow powder on his shoulders. Guided by his daughter, he reached the stage and took a position behind the podium. His daughter stood behind him, watching the crowd, while he tested the mic with a careful adjustment. He cleared his throat, "HHHM." The crowd had gone ballistic at his first manifestation. Cheers rose from one end of the vast human tide to the other, cheers from the people watching in their living rooms, cheers from across the planet. This figure, this distant president who prior to the incident had maintained perfectly lukewarm approval ratings, whose career trajectory had seen him go from unknown outsider upstart to standardized byword for the administration, now elicited a tremendous hurrah. He could have been anyone, any president. His importance was that he was the president, as a concept. In that moment, although the moment would not last forever, all of them loved him. He was safety, security, relief, an ending.
"My fellow Americans,"
he said, and the moment he spoke the crowd fell into rapt silence,
"and even those of you among us today who are not Americans, for I know that this disaster has not been, solely, an American tragedy, to all of you, I say, the worst is over. I say the worst. I say the worst because, in truth, we still have a lot to do. Our cities, our homes are in shambles. The DuPage administration has left scars on this country, scars that won't immediately heal. And on top of that, we as a community must now grapple with new facts that have come to light about our very existence. Magic is real. That's the simple facts. I know I didn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Like many of you, I had grown up with a certain idea about what this world is. It's come as a great shock to me personally, to the people of this country and the world, what we now know. But we do not have the luxury to sit and ponder these developments. We don't have time, right now. Because our sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers are dying, our cities are on the brink of destruction, our very way of life has reached a precipice from which we might not ever come back if we don't act now. Some of you may already be acquainted with a few of the brave young women I brought with me today. We have here my own daughter, Malia. Over there is Miss Hong from Calgary, who was a great help to me during the last few months, and there are many more I could name but we'd be here all week. My own daughter, that's what I learned, my own daughter was one of these brave young women. It came as a great shock, to me personally, just as I'm sure it must come as a great shock to all of you out there learning just now about your own daughters. Here we were, thinking we were safe and secure in our homes, in our homelands. We never knew, I never knew, just what these brave young women were sacrificing each and every night to keep us safe. The evil, I believe we can call it that, the evil that preyed on us. These brave young women fought just as any soldier overseas might, in our own cities and towns. So the first of many changes that I'll be making during the long recovery of this country is to give these brave young women the support they need. The support they deserve. As such, I'll be forming, effective immediately, a new branch of our military. The United States Magic Force, USMF for short, will be a way we can organize, train, and supply these young women and ensure they can perform their duty in the best possible conditions, with all the benefits we already extend to any other serviceman or woman. All American mages, I say American of course because I don't intend to overstep my bounds, but I hope that our friends and allies across the world will follow suit. All American mages are freely encouraged to register as members of the USMF. In exchange, they'll be supplied with payment, housing, the best training possible, psychological and mental health resources, and more as we better understand exactly what these young women need in order to do what they're doing to protect us. And we need them now more than ever. Our cities are filled with what we've now come to know as wraiths, creatures I never could have believed existed if I didn't witness what all of you witnessed here in this very city not 2 hours ago. Anarchy has fallen in several of our largest metropolises, and we'll need the help of every mage we can get to put an end to it.
He paused, straying from his orator's gaze that somehow looked at everyone at once to instead stare at the thickest cluster of cameras dead ahead. The ruins of the Washington Monument rose behind him.
We need you now more than ever, young mages of America. We need you to fight, to protect your homes and the people you love. Please, I'm asking you, go to your nearest government facility, be it a town hall, police station, courthouse, or anything of the like. Register with the USMF. Together, we will heal our great nation.
The crowd cheered. They cheered for a long time, applauded, although the president signaled through posture alone he was not quite finished. He waited until they settled.
Of course, it will not be a quick or easy task. If we rest on our laurels now, if we think we're finished, we could even see our country slip into a far worse state than it's currently in. And while a lot of our local governments, at the state, county, and even city level, still function to a limited extent, our federal government could not be weaker. The judiciary and legislative branches have been almost completely compromised, and until we better understand just what effects the DuPage administration had on the minds of our Supreme Court justices, senators, and congressmen and women, they will not be able to resume their posts. As such, until we can get the country back on its feet, I have no choice but to invoke emergency powers and assume control over all three branches of the federal government. These measures will be temporary, until we can be certain of the stability of our nation. But at this moment in time, we cannot afford to be bound up in obscure formalities and regulations that were designed for a world much different than the one we now find ourselves in. This crisis requires immediate and decisive action, and without these emergency powers that action cannot be taken.
He cleared his throat, acted as though shuffling papers on his podium, but there were no papers.
I'll speak more on what exactly those emergency powers entail soon, once we have a better idea of the scope and magnitude of the situation. For now, though, allow me just to say, stability will return. It has been a dark day for America, a dark day for the world. But today is a new day. Together, everyone, whether you use magic or not, everyone will work together to ensure a safe and happy future for ourselves and our children, and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. And I extend my hand to our friends and allies around the world, and ask for their cooperation in the coming months and years, no matter how trying they may be. Together, I promise, we will not only return this world to normalcy, but build a foundation on which the entire human race can develop into something much greater. The revelations these past few months have been shocking, but we can learn and grow from them. We can work together and push ourselves to places we might never have reached in the world before magic. We can develop new technology, new cures for diseases, new ways of solving the great many problems that face us. Perhaps, even, we may journey to the stars. I thank you.
The crowd cheered. The president looked to his daughter, who nodded to several of the magical girl soldiers who had formed a defensive line in front of the stage. The president turned to exit the stage, but someone shouted.
Schrödinger, what about Schrödinger?
For some reason the president heard this remark. He and his cotter looked to the Capitol mezzanine, where Calgary waved back beside the captured Schrödinger in question. A stir occurred, the question reverberated, and some of those who had not quenched their thirst leaned in as though they expected a summary execution right then on camera. Even people who had fought on the Capitol dome and seen Schrödinger fight alongside them leaned in. But the president said,
"We are nation of laws. All apprehended members of the DuPage administration will be tried in a court of law. And if that court finds them guilty of crimes against humanity, only then will we grant them the justice they deserve."
On the mezzanine, Calgary pressed her hands deep in her pockets so the flaps of her jacket spread like wings at her sides. She tilted back her head and whistled a wayward "io" at Clown Muffle, who had remained seated the entire time.
"Hear that? You'll get one final stage to perform on, I. You can be sure everyone will be watching this time."
Two of her goons seized Clown Muffle under the shoulders and hoisted her to her feet. Several frenetic glances were exchanged between the magical girls near the president and those on the mezzanine. Hastily a plan of action was communicated and Calgary commanded the same goons to shuffle Clown Muffle into the remains of the Capitol.
"It'll be easier that way. If we put her in this crowd everyone'll tear her to bits."
The goons nodded and led Clown Muffle along the mezzanine. A final stage, Clown Muffle thought. Her own private Nuremberg. It seemed something was still sensible after all, and she imagined how she might look in such a place, a courthouse before a guillotine. Everyone watching. Everyone wanted her to die. All right. If that's what they wanted. But Clown Muffle didn't want to die. Calgary had Clown Muffle's gem in her pocket. She put her anti-magic chains around Clown Muffle's wrists. Clearly, nobody could escape from these conditions. Is everyone watching? Did everyone see Calgary place Clown Muffle's soul gem in the pocket of her jacket? And everyone can clearly see the jacket has no holes? A well-made jacket. Designer. Wouldn't do for it to have holes. As everyone can see, there are no holes at all. Are you watching, everyone? Do you see these chains binding Clown Muffle's wrists? Powerful anti-magic chains. It would be a singular feat simply to escape regular chains bound so tight, but these chains have a peculiar property of being anti-magic. As Clown Muffle is, of course, a magician, this makes them particularly dangerous. She please asks you your patience. Because very soon, it will be revealed that Clown Muffle's soul gem is not in Calgary's pocket. No, in fact, Clown Muffle will show that it has, as if by magic, transferred into her own pocket. She could of course show you right now, that is if her hands were free so she could reach inside and retrieve it. But as everyone can see, her wrists are bound tight. Is there any way to escape this prison? How could she possibly escape? As everyone watched Calgary's assistants lead Clown Muffle to the doors of the Capitol, Clown Muffle twisted one wrist. The trick handcuffs popped open. The end. End of chapter. Chapter end.